Hello there, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about the Big Red One, which is the Sam Fuller film that was taken away from him in the late 70s and released in a cut that was cut down pretty much. You lost a whole but an hour of it. And the film was released, and even though it was cut down, it was publicly announced it was cut down and taken out of the director's hands, it still got good reviews because it was a well-made film. What happened was, similar to what happened to Blade Runner, is they had their voiceover to explain things that might have not been so apparent to people. And the voiceover sometimes was good and sometimes was explaining stuff you don't need to see. So the voiceover had good points and bad points, but it was just there. But a lot of the best stuff was just the atmosphere of the world you saw and the incidents of these. Basically, it's about four guys who are riflemen in a platoon with Lee Marvin as the sergeant, and they go through the entire war from North Africa to Sicily to the invasion of Europe and experience the horrors of war and how they get inured to the war and how they get used to the war, really, and the different personalities, but how they basically all get worn down. But it's about the craziness of the war. Now, in the theatrical cut, the craziness of the war is cut down and made more reasonable by the voiceover as it's telling you what to think. Like, there's a character played by Mark Hamill called Griff who has problems killing people because he thinks it's murder, and Lee Marvin says, no, it's not murder, it's you're killing an enemy. Now, he goes along with that in the longer version. The shorter version always seems like he's struggling with it, and it's kind of almost cartoonish when you see the voiceover, when you see it in the longer version. In the shorter version, it makes more sense. It's just someone who's struggling with this. And that's the problem the film has a lot, is the fact in the longer version the voiceover's still there and you don't need it. But as explained, some things that were obviously implied, it's implied and it's really kind of obvious in the film. But it's there to make a point, to make sure you get what everyone's doing and why everyone's going places. And it's to get from scene to scene, because they just thought there wasn't any narrative structure. The narrative structure is how you survive a war. And it doesn't matter where you're going, it's still a war situation. They can send you whatever they want, and you just try to survive the war. And the whole point of it is, soldiers come in, they get killed. Other soldiers come in, they get killed, and these four people plus a sergeant survive. They're the survivors. Everyone else, dead. And they're nicknamed the Four Horsemen, of the apocalypse, because they're the survivors. And that's what the film's about. It's unsentimental. It's got a dark sense of humour, which comes across a lot more in the reconstructed version. But it's still, even in the butchered version, this an hour 50 with the voiceover, it's still a very strong film. Because you've got Lee Marvin. This is one of the last big films he was in that he was really putting the effort into. Like, in the 80s, Lee Marvin had pretty much just given up, really. I think it basically because he was in rubbish films he didn't really care about. And he just thought, I'll take the money and do my thing, and that's it. But in this one, he cared. You could tell he cared. He put the effort in, and a lot in. So you're getting Lee Marvin, who was on the job and was actually going to put the effort in and go to work every day and really help the director. Because he cared, because he was a soldier during World War II, and he wanted to make sure this was right. And you've got four young actors, which is led by Mark Hamill, who everyone knew as Luke Skywalker, and this is completely not Luke Skywalker. You've got Bobby DeCiccio, you've got David Carradine, can't remember his first name, and another actor, Kelly something, as the Four Horsemen. And a lot of these actors you'll barely see again. You might see them on TV, but you're barely going to see them again. So you've basically got the sensitive one who's more of an artist, who has to find his way through a war that's not suited to his sensibility or personality, but he survives somehow, but it corrodes him. You've got a guy who's one of a writer, who's here for material, and he's a cynical one, always get a cigar, and he's very much based on Sam Fuller, and he's a narrator. You've got the smart-ass Italian who's there and who's always in the make to make as much money as he can when he's there. And you've the sensitive, farm guy who is, you know, he's not as sensitive as Griff is, but he's not as cynical as some of the other ones. But he's more straight ahead character. But you don't get the feel when he's too jaded. He's him and Griff are probably the least jaded of the characters. And you've got Lee Marvin. So all the actors are giving their all. They've all really put the effort in, and you can sense it because you see them getting worn down more and more. But it's not so melodramatic. They still keep their sense of humour. They still keep their humanity. But they're going through a war, and the war is taking its toll on them. So it's more realistic about the sense of what happens in the war. Is like you don't switch from one person to another overnight. You change slowly over different experiences, and that's what the film's showing. But the film shows that a lot better in the long version. The long version is full of the scenes that Sam Fuller wanted in the film, because he shot a longer film than what he was allowed to release. And the longer film is a great war movie. It is one of the great war movies. And the shorter version was one of the first war movies that really got me, because it was much more immediate than war movies I'd seen before, because it was about characters in a situation, in a war, rather than just one mission. And most war movies is one mission, and it's almost like, this will win the war for us. And this one, it's a bunch of little missions that keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going, and they never really end. It's just, they're going to keep going. And it's wearing. So, the film is about that kind of sense of futility and tiredness, but also the craziness of it all. So the reconstructed version was done in the 2000s. They found all this material that people thought had been lost, but it turns out it hadn't been lost. It had just been stored away. And they had the script they could go into and see, oh, that scene came here, that scene came here, that scene came here. And they put it all together. Now, they said they needed to keep the voiceover to help clarify where they were going, because they felt this film wasn't so clear. And I watched it recently, and you don't need the voiceover like, at all. It's clear enough. And the voiceover actually adds some contradictions to what the story's telling you originally sometimes. So you don't really need it. You really don't need it. And a lot of the time it's just annoying. It's the big problem of the film, or the reconstructed version of the film, is this film shows you exactly what you need to know. And then the voiceover telling you that again, and it's like, a lot of the time it's like, just please cut it out. I don't need this. This is just in the way. But the film itself is wonderful, because it does take you through the epicness of the war, as in the sense that when it first starts out, of this new troop, there's 12 of them, this rifle troop with a sergeant. And after Africa, there's only 4 of them left. Like, everyone else is wiped out. There's some sequences of them fighting, them landing, in which we see Griff has problems shooting people. And then he gets talked to by Lee Marvin. And then in the next scene, you see him help blow up a tank, which burns people alive in the tank, which is so not what would happen in a normal movie. Like, normally if someone had a problem with killing, it would be like a drama thing for the rest of the movie. And this next scene, he burns people alive in a tank, because that's war, that's the reality of war. You have these problems, deal with it, burn those people. That's the reality, and this is kind of still like after that. Because these Germans are psychos. Then they go into the desert, and then more of the people get killed because they're meant to be covering the rear, and the Germans come through the rear. And it just starts out like that, and the idea when Lee Marvin gets captured and sent to this hospital that gets raided, and he's, in with these crazy people in this hospital run by the Germans before the Americans come and take it over. And the film's full of these crazy moments where it goes off from what would be a normal war movie and goes into to the side effects of a war, which is lots of children who have been orphaned by the war, lots of crazy folk that have been let out and let loose on the world that should be locked away. People going crazy as they realise how crazy and scary war is. People getting killed for no reason. At one point, someone of the soldiers died of a heart attack because they're so scared, and it's just thrown away, just leave the body. There's lots of stuff like that. It's just like, we have to be callous. We have to keep going to win this war against these people. And what the long version shows you just how brutal the Germans are, and how this is needed to defeat these guys. It's like there's no room for sentimentality. They're in a war. To defeat these people, they have to be brutal. So the film is really about that, and the film is really about the silences of people watching each other, watching the weird situation go on, and dealing with it. And it's all about looks to each other and looks at what the other one's thinking. And that's why the voiceover seems so annoying. Is like we get everything without the voiceover. We really get it. Everything's there. It's been shot. It's been edited. It's been cut together. The actors have done their job. You know exactly what you need to know. And as the film goes on, they go to after North Africa. Once you've got the idea of these survivors, when you go to Sicily, they have become a lot more. They're much more seasoned as soldiers, so they can start messing, because now they're used to Lee Marvin. They can start messing with him if he messes with them, and it's much more like, he's a sergeant, he is the commander, but there's a much more of a human relationship between them at this point. Well known as the rules of engagement, but they know each other at this point, so it leads to very nice moments throughout it of them messing with each other, of them accepting each other's flaws and accepting where there's fear in some of them, accepting humanity of everyone else. But it's done in little small moments that you get between men, really. Like the way men relate is different between where men and women relate, or different between where women and women relate. It's a just different thing. It's grudging and very quiet, and sometimes it's through sarcasm and things like that. But you're getting it. The whole film's about that, the growing bond between them, even in this savage land, and how unsentimental it is. It's like, because anyone can get killed at any moment. And at this point, they're looking at any replacements pretty much as dead men walking. There's one point where someone gets there's a bomb that castrates him, and they're making jokes. Don't worry, throws one of the testicles away. Don't worry, that's why you got two. And it's just so harsh. And then some of the soldiers are saying, I'll get killed. This is what makes you so special. And there's this sort of bravado, but it's also darkly funny because they just know how insane war is. You can get killed at any moment. You can't make any plans. But the human nature means you're always making plans. So the writer guy is always, there's a whole subplot of his book that's been bought and published and sold to the movies and things. But that can get killed at any minute in the film. The film goes on from Sicily, and by the end of Sicily, you're seeing how random it is. You're seeing a lot more orphans. There's a whole subplot of this kid who's trying to get his mother buried, and it's starting to smell, which you wouldn't get in other movies. There's another scene where someone puts flowers in Lee Marvin's hat, and then she gets shot by the Germans as they're shooting at the platoon because she's nearby, and she gets killed, and it's like so brutal. And it just shows you this is war. This is horrible. War is just terrible in every possible way. And it destroys people everywhere. It's not just the soldiers, it's everyone gets it. Finally, the big section is the European conflict. So by the time they get to Europe, a lot of these, they're getting new replacements in who think they know something. And they really don't, because they haven't been through Africa and Sicily like these guys have. And so it starts the D-Day as they go through this whole thing, is where like Griff shows his strength, where he actually has to do this absolutely insane thing of this long pipe that has to go through this barbed wire, it's full of explosive, just to blow it up so that there's a line that all the soldiers can go through to actually help get off the beach to take the rest of the land. And that's a really tense sequence. It's wonderful. It's one of the great D-Day sequences. I mean, people say Saving Private Ryan, but this one's more tense because this is about the damage. In Saving Private Ryan, they go up the beach and it seems brutal but fast. And there's lots of shots from Saving Private Ryan that came from this film, like the thing with the watch and things. All came from this film. There's no way people didn't watch this film and go, that's really good. Let's use some of this because this is great. I mean, I wouldn't say Saving Private Ryan ripped off. I would say that it actually took it and let it go, okay, how can we go further than this? But this is like a good template to actually use because it shows that the fear of these guys trying to get through one beach to get to the bit to kill the Germans is how tough it is and how horrible it is. This is like the template sequence. And then after that, they have to go into France and then go into Europe and in freezing winter Europe. And I went in Belgium. There's a section in Belgium where they're dealing with people who have been like saved by the Americans and how they're now living at certain hotels and things like that. So you get a lot of stuff about the humanity, and it's not just about the fighting, it's about where they stay, what they do there. There's a sequence where they have to save all these guys in a mental hospital and go through the mental hospital so they don't get so the inmates don't get killed, just the Germans, and there's a whole sequence there that's wonderful. Again, another thing, you would never do this nowadays because it'd be like viewed as too insensitive. There's even worse. Even for people who are sensitive, even worse is where Mark Hamill and an older woman, have a sex scene while they're surrounded by all these mentally damaged and handicapped people sleeping all around them, which would offend so many people nowadays. It's a great scene. It's just something you've never seen. It's like, yeah, that would happen in war. That would happen where everything went crazy. And there's just whole sequences of like they're in the forest and they get attacked, and one of the characters, Kaiser, gets killed, but he kills the person who killed him. Did I kill the person who killed me? Type of thing. That's what he said to Lee Marvin. And it's a great little sequence because he's talking about certain things that are weird that suddenly make him human. So he's one of the others that stand out beyond the core characters. But you actually get characters who come in and appear for a while, and you actually see who they are. You don't get that in the shorter version. You get in the longer version though. And eventually they're going towards Germany, step by step. They're getting kicked back, pushed back into the line. They keep on pushing through. There's a sequence where they have to deal with all these old men who are loyal to Hitler, and Lee Marvin has to intimidate them to get them out of the way without killing them. There's scenes where they have to hide from tanks in the snow. It's just a great bunch of sequences just showing how war's not just the big battle. It's actually about these little skirmishes where a lot of battalions are going forward, step by step, winning these little fights to push people forward again. And that's what they're doing throughout the winter in 1944. It's really wonderfully done. And it also shows them going back and forward from the front line back to where they were staying, then forward again, and how the German infiltrators have to deal with. There's lots of just weird, fun stuff that's very Sam Fuller. Eventually, instead of going into Berlin, they end up liberating a concentration camp. This is the finale of the film where Lee Marvin has to help a child who's dying and just try to give him a final day before he dies. And there's a scene with Mark Hamill when they finally get into the death camps and see what the Germans have been doing. Hamill's character goes mad and starts shooting this one German and keeps on shooting this one body. That's really brutal. And there's a finale with this soldier who you've seen throughout the film. He's been this character who you've seen through the film as the Nazi, who's this awful German character who you want to see die. And at the end, he gets stabbed after the war is over by Lee Marvin, which is a call back to the beginning. And of course, once you realise the war's over, they're going to save him, even though you know he deserves to die for what he's been doing. He's killed his own people. He's killed so many people brutally. He's going to be a cause of nightmares in the future. But they save him anyway because it's a point of pride, which shows you how they're better than him. Of course, in these kind of small moments, there's some voiceover stuff that just takes away from the full emotion of the scene. It's always like, just take the voiceover away. Come on. You don't need any of this. It became a frustration for me as I was watching it. So I watched this film in the projector, even though it was only in standard definition, so it was not the greatest image, but you could still see the power of the images and the situations and what they were doing. So it was just a wonderful experience. So I'd highly recommend if you can get the. I got it in Blu-ray. You can get the SD in Blu-ray. You get a making of. You get a documentary Samuel Fuller. Your commentary. It's really good, and you get the longer version in SD, which is the version to watch. It's just wonderful. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it inspires you to go and see this film. This film is great. Short version's good, but the longer version's really something. It's one of those films that should be in 4K. This is a film that should be in 4K. It needs to be in 4K. It needs to have a full restoration of the longer version and get rid of the voiceover, because that's a masterpiece of war movie. It's not a war movie in the traditional sense. It's about surviving a war, you know, and just how crazy a war is, and how degrading the war is, and how crazy a life it is to be a soldier in a long term in a war, and what it does to you, without having any moral speeches about what it does to you, just in the eyes and the movements, and just how people react through one bit of insanity to the next. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it inspired you to go and see this film. That's me for now. Bye.